Everyone, we're going to get started very shortly, so find a seat, a perch. Close your mouths. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started very shortly. Wrap it up. Wrap it up.
I need Brian.
Yo, whistle.
I guess the music's playing.
Brendan, can we turn the music down? Hello. Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for Experimental Science 2022, the bite-sized National Science Week event where we explore the incredible science behind beer. But before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from where we're joining you, the Muwinina people of Nipaluna. And I'd like to invite those of you joining us via the live stream to take a moment to acknowledge and reflect upon the traditional owners of the land you're joining us from too. So, our names are Matt and Kelsey. We're the brains behind Science Made Beerable, which is a volunteer-run group that explores the incredible and often complex science behind beer. We do this through events and blogs, such as this event. So tonight we have 4 brewers who have brewed experimental beers, especially for this night. And these beers are based on the 4 key ingredients of beer. That's water, malt, hops, and yeast. And so what we did is we asked these brewers to choose one of those 4 key ingredients and explore and play and experiment with that ingredient, pushing it to its limit. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our all-star expert brewer panel. We have Carla Naismith from Adelaide's Shapeshifter Brewing Co. From the Blue Mountains Brewery that probably needs no real introduction, Boogie Caldwell from Mountain Culture Beer Co.
Boogie Caldwell, you'll hear that very often.
From the western suburbs of Melbourne, the Belgian side of Melbourne, we have Josh Moraine from Black Arts Brewers and Blenders. And of course, a Hobart local legend from Shambles Brewery, Cornel Young Kulovich.
So before we get started, I've just got a few thank yous and housekeeping to get through. But first we need to thank our amazing sponsors. It's National Science Week, Hop Products Australia and Voyager Craft Malt. So we really appreciate their support. Thanks to Shambles for hosting us again. You guys are absolute legends organising a lot of things for us. Thanks to Flair Productions for the videography and amazing live stream that's going out currently. Thanks to Brendan Berenice Audio Visual for all the sound and lighting. Thanks to Jasper Kelly who did all the amazing event artwork this year. You can actually buy one of the t-shirts with the amazing artwork on it today, back where you came from, where you got signed off at the door. We want to thank Deanna Bond who did the amazing photography and is somewhere walking around taking some pics for us tonight. Thanks to Hop Vine and Still for doing all the distributions and orders. That's a huge help for us. And thanks to our wonderful volunteers who we've got walking around. You'll come to appreciate them greatly as they're bringing the beer for you tonight. And welcome to all our at-home viewers. We really appreciate that you guys are joining in from wherever you're joining. We hope that you've gone and got all the amazing snacks that have been expertly prepared by Cicerone, Lindsay, Greg tonight as well. So some housekeeping for the people here at the event. The bathrooms are back towards the door where you came from, towards the kitchen to the right. The fire escapes are back at the front door and also behind you guys. And there'll be a short intermission around 8 o'clock, so you can run to the loo, order food or whatever you need to do then. And also, if you need to drive or just don't feel like drinking 6.6 standard drinks tonight, you don't have to open all of your beers. You can take them home, you're very welcome to. If you came with a friend, maybe you want to share your beers tonight, but it's up to you. Anyway, the live stream will be recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel and Facebook for you to rewatch if you want to. So.
They get to keep the glass.
Oh, and you get to take the glass home, obviously, the nice event glasses. Cool. So, no further ado, we'll get going. So, I think you've been handed out the Shambles Lager.
Yeah, we just don't have it up here though. Volunteers, can we get a couple up here? Don't mean to skip the queue, but slightly important we get them first. Thanks, Reid. Hey! Alright, so let's crack in. So the first beer is Shambles Hard Science. So while we're opening these beers, Cornell, and we're on the opposite side, this microphone swap's going to be interesting. Firstly, thanks again for letting us use your incredible space. It's the second year we've been here, and the third year you've been involved in this event, which is incredible. And Shambles, you know, it's well known around Tassie, but can you, for those who don't know, can you give us a quick introduction about the brewery? Here we go. The brewery and how you started it.
Sorry, passing it down.
Sorry, we've had some sound issues.
We've been here, I think, 6.5 years. I think February will be 7 years, which is crazy to think it's been that long. Short story is I used to be a science maths teacher, got bored, had a midlife crisis, started a brewery. That's the short version. Probably like, I don't know, 80% of independent brewers around the country, I think, that same story. Bored, don't want to work for the man anymore, want to work for myself. I pass it back. Want me to come and stand next to you?
Yeah, maybe Kelsey. We'll swap. We had to make a last minute change of microphones. Sorry, everybody. So I guess, as I said, everyone got to choose an ingredient to experiment with. So the thing was, it was first in, best dressed. And so everyone chose hops, yeast, and malt, and nobody wanted water. And so we had a think, and we were like, well, who could do something with water? Who wouldn't be afraid of water? And of course, the first person who came to mind was Cornell. So could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this beer and what you did as the experiment?
He basically just called me a nerd. Who wants water chemistry? This guy. Science, maths teacher background in me. I love science, love experimenting, love playing, and so when Matt said, do you want to do a beer for this? Do you want to do water? So, everyone got to choose, and we didn't. We had a chat about what we could do with that and, how we could sort of showcase water, and it's a really difficult ingredient to kind of showcase. It's obviously most of what's in your glass, but its effects aren't obvious generally. To most people, we talk about hops, malt, yeast. Those flavours are really obvious. We use different hop types, we use different yeast types, different malt types. That's most of the flavour you're getting. And water tends to get ignored. It's kind of like the bit in the background that, the brewer does something with and the drinker kind of doesn't really experience. So we sort of, brainstormed how we could make water stand out, how we could do something with water that would be obvious in the glass to everyone here and at home. So we came up with the concept of basically taking a water profile, a water composition from, a part of the world where the water has a whole heap of dissolved minerals in it, famous for brewing certain kinds of beer, and then brew a style of beer that doesn't go with that water. So we've intentionally made a shit beer. It was on purpose, I promise. We decided to, we were thinking, we had a bunch of ideas about different styles, but we sort of hit upon a light, not too bitter, subtly hopped European style lager, and then using water from, trying to make our water similar in profile to a place called Burton-on-Trent, which is a famous region in England where the water is known to be very, very hard, very, very high in minerals, and not very, very good for brewing this style of beer. And we didn't quite know what we would get. We didn't know, we had an idea. Knew it wouldn't be very good. We had an idea about what it would taste like, but we were really surprised at the results. Like, it really was obvious. I hope it is obvious what the water is doing in this beer. That was the inspiration.
So you said a little bit about how, hard water versus soft water, and you said hard water is full of minerals, etc. Can you explain that a little bit more? And what's the water like here in Hobart, for example?
So we're super lucky here in Hobart. Sucked in, you guys. We have really, really soft water. It's practically empty, practically distilled. There are a few key things in water that brewers care about. Plenty of different things dissolved in your drinking water in various amounts, and the main ones that brewers care about, the substances dissolved in that affect the brewing process and flavours of beer, are a range of key minerals, and once they dissolve, they separate into different ions. And the key ones we care about are calcium, magnesium, chloride, sulfate, carbonate, sodium for some people. So that's sort of the main key group of ions that brewers care about. And in Hobart, we measure the amounts of those in parts per million, which is roughly translated, in a dilute solution to milligrams per litre. So tiny, tiny amounts. And in Hobart, pretty much all of those are under 10 ppm. That's, basically we have really good starting water because we can kind of put those salts back in artificially to build whatever water profile we want to suit the beer style.
So just to make the comparison, you said here in Hobart it's less than 10 parts per million. Off the top of your head, do you know what kind of levels we were talking in this? And if you were brewing a lager, would you leave it untouched for Hobart?
I'll answer the second one first. No, I think most brewers would treat it, and depending on what kind of lager you're trying to make. If you're trying to make a Pilsner, Hobart water's great as it is, pretty much. Like, you want it very, very soft, devoid of pretty much anything. Every brewer's going to have a different opinion and a different technique as to what things they prefer in their beer. Other kinds of lager want certain amounts of those ions in them for various reasons. So you would sort of treat your water depending on the style. So a Pilsner versus a Munich Helles or a Vienna lager or an American style lager, they're all going to want different water profiles. And then all the various ales, all the other, darker lagers, lighter lagers, darker ales, hoppier versus malty, like all of that stuff, the water makes a difference, and you want to create the water to suit the beer. What was your other question? In this one? Now you're testing me. So, off the top of my head, recommended brewing ranges for those ions, chlorine's like 20 to 150. This was 250. So we're like way past the recommended range for... Sorry, that was calcium. Magnesium recommended range is like 0 to 30. This is 40. Chloride, I think, is 0 to 100, and this was 40. So chloride's low in this. I'll explain why that is a bit later on. So chloride's actually in a decent range for a normal beer. Sulfate's meant to be 0 to 300 or 350. This is 600. So it's like double the recommended range, and that's whatever that means. Like, brewers can do whatever they want. Carbonate, as low as possible you want it. under 50 hopefully. I think this was 150. Right. So lots of salts, way more than we'd ever put in any normal beer, nothing we'd normally do with a beer, to make it really stick out.
So you purposely added all these salts to make a really hard beer. Say you weren't in Hobart, say you were in Burton, and you were trying to make a lager without... You were trying not to make this beer. How do breweries go about removing hardness from water? Is it possible?
Yeah, definitely. Traditionally, the basic method would be boiling. So boiling your water before you used it in brewing. The boiling process changes a bunch of stuff about the equilibrium of the different ions and whether they're soluble or not. And it tends to precipitate out, so it causes some of those ions to not be soluble anymore. So they join back together again and become solid, and they drop out to the bottom of whatever vessel you're boiling it in, and then you can decant the water off the top, and that will remove, that you leave those salts behind. It's not very efficient, doesn't get rid of all of it. Not very energy efficient, takes time, takes a whole vessel. So modern method is to use reverse osmosis, which is basically a filtration method. So you're forcing water past a membrane, you're getting pure water on one side and you're leaving behind highly concentrated, a small amount of highly concentrated salty water, brine, that's got all of the salts dissolved in it. Readily available these days. You can get them small units for your house. You can get giant ones for big breweries. So modern breweries in places where they have hard water will use reverse osmosis to create, empty water, and then they'll put salts back in to target whatever style they're going for.
Right, okay. So I did notice there's a lot of activity in here because there is a somewhat side beer to this just to show some of the impacts of water chemistry. You went rogue. So as people are drinking this, and if you're at home and you've got just a traditional kind of lager in the fridge, crack it open and make the comparison. But can you tell us, some of the impacts that some of these key kind of minerals have on beer flavour, mouthfeel, those kind of things?
So, confession time, we cheated because it's our home base and we could. The nerdy scientist in me convinced the other guys that it would be a good idea to brew 2 of these because it's really hard to kind of tell you, it tastes a certain way and it would have tasted like this without you actually being able to taste it. So we decided to brew a whole second batch of this exact same beer with pure Hobart tap water. So we kegged it and people are bringing it around now, so you've got an A and a B. Matt wouldn't let us put a 5th can in the pack, so I'm sorry to the people at home. But we suggested that maybe if you just got like a really light flavoured, easy drinking mainstream lager, that it's going to approximate what this other beer is. So hopefully by having the comparison of the 2 side by side, you can really tell exactly what the salts have done to this beer. The ingredients are the same, the recipe's the same, everything's about it's the same, and we did it, a day apart. Those various ions all do various things. Calcium is super important. It's involved in a whole bunch of chemical reactions in the beer. It helps with flocculation and clarity. It helps with, yeast and enzymes and a bunch of stuff. But its main, I think its most important thing, one of its most important things that it does is that it helps with controlling pH when you're brewing in the mash, which is a super, super important thing. So it lets us make the mash more acidic to get the mash in the right pH range for the enzymes that chop the starch up into sugars during the mash. Those amylase enzymes want to range between 5.2 and 5.6. Without the calcium in there, it stays a bit high. Calcium is an easy way of bringing down the pH. Doesn't really have much of a flavour impact beyond that normally. At normal doses, it'll reduce pH, but it won't actually taste like anything. Calcium's pretty flavour neutral as an ion. But at high doses, it can start to taste a little salty. And this is a fairly high dose. Magnesium's similar, does a similar thing to calcium, a little bit less important, but it does have a flavour impact. If you put too much of it in, it can taste a little bit sour, a little bit acrid, and we're beyond the recommended range, not super high, but beyond the recommended range in this beer. So carbonates are generally bad. They make your wort more alkaline, which you don't want for those enzymes, and so we tend to want to not have carbonates and bicarbonates in there. And the two that a lot of brewers focus on, sort of the main pair that everyone talks about in terms of flavour impact, not pH or all the other stuff, are sulphate and chloride. And the general gist is that sulphates can accentuate hop bitterness. So they have an impact in how hops taste in the beer. Not necessarily their flavour or any of the oils, but the way that the bitterness comes across the palate. So if you've got higher sulphate levels, your hops will taste a little bit sharper and more crisp, is the kind of way that it's described. Chloride, on the other hand, enhances malt character, so the fullness or the sweetness of the beer. So brewers often focus on the ratio of those two things. So regardless of the amount, whether you put 50 ppm in of each or 100 ppm in of each, that's parts per million of each, that ratio would be 1:1, and you kind of have a balance between accentuating hops and malt. So you can kind of tweak those as a bit of a lever to make it go one way or the other. So in the base beer, the soft lager, with the Hobart tap water, both are super low, right below the end of the recommended range. They wouldn't be having much of an impact at all, and the ratio would be basically 1:1 because there's hardly any of either in there. In the Burton lager, that I mentioned earlier that our sulphates are at like 600 ppm, like twice the recommended range, and our chloride was at like 40, right in the middle of the recommended range. That's basically what the Burton water profile gets reported as around the place in brewing circles. And it's kind of deliberate because it really smashes that sulphate to chloride ratio way in favour of sulphate. So normally brewers will say that your sulphate to chloride ratio, if you want it to be malty, then you should have like a 0.5 ratio, like twice as much chloride to sulphate. And if you want to accentuate the hop bitterness, it should go the other way, up to like 9:1 in favour of sulphate. This is like 18:1. Like, it's so far towards sulphate, it's not funny. And I think it comes across. I'm hoping you all agree that this beer, compared to this beer, has a really different hop bitterness character. It's quite sharp, it's quite salty. It's kind of got a real tang to it. That this one doesn't. Am I right, or am I just making it up? Am I convincing you? So yeah, that's basically the range of what we're looking at, the things we tend to care about, and the real difference between these two beers.
That was a very good overview of the salts in water. I should say, I forgot to say at the start, I think we didn't say, if you have questions within the room, chuck your hand up. We do have a roving mic, so just sing out to them and they can bring it your way. But also, if you're on the live stream, put your question in the comments, and I do have a little device here which tells me that you're asking questions. We do have a question over there. Reed, are you about, or are you busy handing out beers?
Oh, really? Oh, thank you.
Hi, thanks. So you've mentioned a lot about tap water. What would happen if you used rainwater to make beers in this? And would there be anything you need to do? Is there some different composition that would be in the water and rainwater to make beers?
That's a good question. Rainwater is not, contrary to popular belief, rainwater is not distilled. It's not deionized. It doesn't just fall out of the sky perfectly pure. It's close, but it does pick up some stuff from the atmosphere on the way. The main one being carbon dioxide, falling through the atmosphere, picking up carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide dissolves and forms carbonic acid. And once that's in there, there's sort of like an instant equilibrium set up between carbonic acid, carbonate and bicarbonate, and can sort of shift between those three forms. You'll have very, very low levels, but that's one example of something that is in rainwater. Then, of course, it's going to fall onto something to collect it. So if you're collecting it, you know, off a roof, it's going to pick up something off that. If you're collecting it off a roof through a pipe into a container, it's going to pick up something from that. So the answer is it depends. It could be super pure depending on how you collect it, or it could pick up a whole bunch of stuff from things that it's touching along the way. But generally most rainwater would be very, very similar to tap water, and would be fairly pure in profile, and you could build on it. So that's another thing. If you're brewing on a small scale and you've got terrible tap water, you live, you know, somewhere where the water's terrible, like Adelaide. Sorry. Low-hanging fruit. That was rude. Then you know, like if you had a water tank at your house and you collected your rainwater, that would be a way of having some, you know, water for brewing. I mean, the other thing is that our tap water obviously is treated as well. It doesn't just, you know, it's not completely pure. We're adding, you know, chlorine to it for, you know, for sanitary purposes, and that's not great. We don't want that in our beer. So even if you're using tap water, even here with the tap water, we pass it through filters to try and remove the chlorine so that that's not getting through.
Oh, we got another question. Sorry, Kelsey's got a question.
Do you want me to swap again?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, why is Burton upon Trent of note for brewing, and what kind of beers do they normally brew?
It's developed this sort of reputation in beer and brewing circles because it was really notable back in the day for producing English-style pale ales, you know, bitter, malty English-style pale ales, and for having, you know, what was regarded at the time the best in the country, you know, really like flavourful, punchy kind of ales. And other breweries were like, how do they do it, you know? And it turned out to be the groundwater. Turned out that their groundwater was just like this, like super salty. And so in an ale, in something, you know, that's why we picked a lager, a light lager. In this beer, it stands out way more in terms of the salts and what they're doing. But in a, you know, malty English bitter with a lot of hops in it, it contributes to all of that. It underpins it, it holds it up, it pushes the hops in a certain direction, the malt in another direction, and it would have made those beers stand out. And that's it's kind of one of those things like a good home brewer can brew a beer at home that is like 99% as good as a commercial brewery with good ingredients and good technique and good equipment. And if you don't care about water, you can still make a really good beer. But it's quite surprising, even for someone who doesn't know what was done, that if they care about their water and treat it well, that's that sort of extra 1%. It's, you know, you compare it side by side with someone who hasn't done that, and it can really make that beer lift a little. So that's why they were sort of famous historically for it. And most brewers know it as the example of the hardest water that, you know, sort of naturally occurring water.
Can we go here and then we'll go to you? Sorry.
Hi, Cornell.
Not you, Jess. Don't ask me hard questions.
I was just wondering what the difference was in the mash pH between both of the brews. And did you find that one brew was more stable throughout the process?
It's a good question. Sam? That's Jess's husband who brewed the beer. I actually I don't know about the second one, the soft one. I didn't look it up, but I did check this one, and I was quite surprised to find that the pH was super low. Because of the high carbonate level and high sulfate level, I had actually assumed that the pH would be fairly balanced or maybe on the high end, but it was actually like close to 5. And there was only one reading in the brew sheet, so I don't know how that stabilised. But I don't have a direct comparison for this one. I don't know. I'm sorry. My guess would be that this was actually really high. We've brewed plenty of beers here with light malt and not a lot of salts in them, and the pH is usually high and probably needs acidification by some other method. Whereas this was really acid. So I think the salts have made the pH drop.
Yeah, I had a question about how people compensate or counteract the high mineral content water by boiling. But there's a boiling step in your brewing process where you boil the wort, and that's often where you add hops. So why is the minerals not dropping out there and still affecting the rest of the process?
Good question. I'm glad you asked. It's complicated, and I don't know the full answer, but the point where we're adding them in the mash, we know the specific effect that calcium's having at that point in terms of reacting with malt phosphates, creating acid and dropping the pH. After the mash has happened, we've actually got this super concentrated solution in the kettle that's a cocktail of millions of different chemical compounds. So the interaction of the salts in that boil is way more complicated. It's not the same as in the water. In the water, it's a handful of salts that are in these specific equilibria, whereas once they're in the boil and the temperature's different and the conditions are different, the pH is different, those sort of equilibriums get driven in different directions. So yes, some salts will drop out in the boil. There are some things that will precipitate, and we do get that. And it's like one of them's really well known, like calcium ions react with oxalate, form calcium oxalate, which is beer stone, and that sticks to brewing equipment, and we don't want it, it's a bugger, we have to clean it off. So there are definitely salts that drop out, but because of what else is going on in there, a lot of those things stay dissolved to make it through. Yeah.
Well, that time went so quick. We're already ready to move on to the next beer. I know it's quick and it's not very much time to drink a whole beer, but we need to move on. So thanks so much, Cornell. So if everyone could start opening the next can, which is Shape... Oh. Woo. The next beer, which is Shapeshifter Brewing Co.'s Cause and Effect. Before we do this, Brendan, I have an idea, and tell me if I'm stupid, but could we steal the industry microphone? The industry microphone, and then we can just use roving.
All right, so hopefully everybody should have the Shapeshifter Cause and Effect in front of them. So we have Carla Naismith here. Yep, yeah, the mic. From South Australia. And firstly, Carla, could you introduce yourself and Shapeshifter?
Sure. Oh, that's not on.
Maybe now?
Hello. Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. So I've been working for Shapeshifter for about 12 months now. The brewery itself has been operational for a little bit longer than that, but we were contract brewing prior to that. Our two co-founders, Kevin and James, started the brand about 3 years ago now, and we're contracting through predominantly Big Shed and a little bit of Little Bang in South Australia. So we were really lucky in that we were able to build a bit of a brand presence prior to opening our own venue in Findon, so in the inner western suburbs of South Australia, or Adelaide in South Australia. We jumped in about 12 months ago now, and we're going from strength to strength, I think. Predominantly, hazies, that's kind of our warehouse. This beer kind of showcases what we're about.
That's great. And you had first pick of the ingredients, the 4 ingredients, and you guys went with hops. So why did you choose hops?
I apologise to everyone. I didn't realise that we actually got in before everybody else did, so sorry about that. I must have been very hot on the emails that day. Hops are definitely our wheelhouse. We talk about our brand as being modern experimental beers, but we definitely have a focus on hoppy, hazy beers. Not to say we don't brew a great dark lager, for instance. We're pouring something at the moment that I think's delicious. But yeah, hops are definitely our wheelhouse. So we often play heavily into hops, and we like to have a play with new techniques and new dry hopping schedules and new products. HPA always come to the table on that one. Hop Products Australia, shout out. So yeah, we love to play with hops. I mean, I'm sure there's no novices in the house tonight. It seems like a pretty experienced crowd, but everybody has an understanding of the kind of impact that hops can have on the final flavour of beer. So yeah, hops are our wheelhouse, and we love them.
That's true, everybody does love hops. Can you tell us about the experiment? What was the experiment here?
So we reached out to, well, actually HPA are sponsors of this evening's event. Thanks, guys. So we had a chat with our local HPA rep about what we might like to play with. And HPA actually have a really great hop breeding program, which is fantastic, all run in-house. So we were able to access some experimental hops that haven't been released to market yet. So we used HPA 033, and so that was really most of the experiment. So we access these hops. As I said, they don't have a name yet. They haven't been commercially released. So they came to us in whole flower format, which is challenging in itself to utilise in the brew house and in the way we might like to use them. So yeah, it's a crossbreed between Pride of Ringwood and Liberty, and it was actually first cross-pollinated in 2003. Now, for those playing at home, I was 15 when this hop was first cross-pollinated, which is quite a while ago. So there's a lot of legwork that goes into new hop varieties and to hop breeding programs. So it can take anywhere between 6 to 10 years before a hop is cross-pollinated and actually becomes available for brewing trials. And then it might take, another 5 to 10 years before that product is actually released to the public or to brewers to utilise. So, yeah, we're using this HPA 033 in our brew house, and we used it as a whirlpool edition. So we generally, with this style of beer, will cool our whirlpool. So we'll cool it to approximately 80 degrees. And yeah, we use the whole hop flowers in the whirlpool from there. We did also dry hop this beer pretty heavily with Topaz as well. Obviously, the challenge with whole hop flowers is that it's a little more challenging to use them in fermentation, dry hopping. So we use pellets as well. It's a combination of the two. And yeah, so Topaz and HPA 033 have paired really well in this beer, I think.
So can you just explain for people because there will be people in the audience who don't know what whirlpools and dry hopping might be. So what part of the brewing process is the whirlpool? And so that's when you added the whole HB 033 flowers, and then the dry hopping that happens later with the pellets. At what stage are those happening? Yeah, sure. So whirlpool is a process we undertake. We would still call it hot side, even though that's the point at which we might start partially cooling the wort. The purpose of whirlpool is to take solids, protein, matter that's in solution after the boil that may have coagulated and separated, but we don't want to take it through to fermenter because it's going to give us flavours that we're not looking for. So whirlpool is a really important process to take those solids out of solution and form a little trub mound at the bottom of your kettle before you send it through to fermenter. So often we at Shapeshifter and Mountain Culture and many other hop-forward breweries will cool our whirlpool slightly, which means when you add hops at that point, the alpha acids aren't isomerising, which means, well, not to the same level, which means you're not getting as much bitterness from those hops, but you're getting much more of the fruit aroma and flavour.
And again, with dry hops, you'll find the same thing. So you won't generally pick up a lot of bitterness from your dry hop additions, but it's predominantly, hop aroma and flavour. So that's when you might see those real fruit forward, as an example, flavours coming forward. So, and obviously that's happening during fermentation. Sorry, maybe that's not clear to everyone, but we also tend to active ferment dry hop these particular styles of beer. So I know my friend Lindsay, who took part in the event last year, did a biotransformation lager, I think, with Eclipse. So biotransformation is a process whereby if you are adding your hops during fermentation, the yeast is still very active and it acts on the oils that are found in the hop pellets and creates stable haze, which is really important for these styles, but also very punchy fruit flavours as well. So
So a lot of brewers are wanting to really push the limits of the hoppiest beer, have a really, hop forward, aromatic, fruity beer, but it's not as simple as just adding a ton of hops, is it?
no, it's definitely about technique.
Technique, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the different stages of the brew when you're adding it, the different types of hop, whether it be pelleted or whole flowers and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. So we were having a conversation this afternoon about when Shapeshifter first started and we were contract brewing, and somebody added our Whirlpool hop additions when the wort was still at 90-something degrees. Now, the difference that you're going to get between... that beer was 150 IBUs, everybody. The difference you get between whirlpooling hops at 80C versus 99C is huge. The processes and the techniques are really important. And again, hazies have really only come to the fore in the last, let's say decade, but it's probably shorter than that really. And the science around biotransformation and the importance of when you're dry hopping your beers and all that, those sorts of conversations have only really become apparent to brewers definitely in the last decade, I think. So, yeah, it's important.
And so often, cracking this can and smelling this beer, it's very fruity smelling. It smells like a breakfast juice or something like that. But obviously it doesn't taste like that. So there's a difference in what your nose is perceiving to what your mouth is perceiving. And what is that about hops that give you different aroma compounds versus taste, flavour?
Yeah, again, utilisation at what point in the process you're adding those hops definitely has an impact. Also the style of hop. So Australian hops from HPA tend to be super fruit forward, punchy, high alpha. Whereas if you're utilising, a more traditional hop from, the UK or Germany or, you're going to get really different flavours from those hops as well. And you might utilise those kinds of hops in something more like a lager or, an amber ale or, whereas we tend to punch for the higher alpha, more fruit-forward styles in beers such as this. So.
And so what do you look for when you're looking at these new varieties that, HBA are releasing? When you're looking at different hops to start using, what sort of hops are you looking for? What kind of characteristics are you after?
It really depends on the desired outcome, really. I think at Shapeshifter, given that our house flavour is so hop forward, we're generally looking for high alpha, super fruity, big punchy hops. And we're looking at products like Incognito. I believe HPA are about to come out with something similar that you can use in dry hopping, which is like a liquid hop format in dry hopping, which is really exciting. We essentially are just, for these styles of beer, are looking for big, fruity, high alpha styles of hops. Yeah.
So it's very consumer driven. Whatever the market is wanting to drink, you guys are going to brew with. But then thinking about how long it takes these hops to actually come to market from, the initial cross of these two parent plants was in 2003. So maybe this is a question for the folks at HPA. How are you guys keeping ahead of the trend? You don't know what the trend is going to be 15 years later and what hops the brewers are wanting and what the drinkers are wanting. So I don't know if we've got someone... Well, if you can answer, Carla.
Well, I think the hops kind of lead the way a little bit. We can't utilise a hop product that doesn't exist yet, but obviously we have control about how we utilise it. I think from my understanding of the hop breeding program, and I might be speaking on behalf of HPA and maybe I should throw to them, but they've definitely got a lot of different hops in the program at any one time, and they're measuring, agronomic performance and sensory output and all that sort of stuff. So they're looking at those kinds of performance indicators and flavours and sensory outcomes before they're deciding what to release. But I can see a HPA staff member with a microphone in their hand.
We've got George here. He might be able to expand on that.
Hello. Yeah, so that's right. I guess it can take a long time to bring anything to market, so it's impossible to preempt what brewers are going to be after, 10, 15 years down the track. So it's kind of a cooking on 4 burners sort of approach, where maybe you've got one you think is really hot and some others on the simmer, I guess. It's certainly easy to create new varieties. I guess to get one that will be commercially viable is really hard. Easy to get seed, you just make your cross. Depending on how fertile it is, you can get up to 1,000 per cross, and then it's a matter of sort of screening something that's up to the rigours of the horticultural practices through to the picking. And then, of course, we throw a few out to brewers and even do some in-house, our own tastings. A lot of terrible, terrible hops out there that we produce that never see the light of day, of course. They all just kind of get run into the ground, and we keep searching. So it's kind of a constant R&D process where we give away free samples, and hopefully everyone can do something, the brewers can do something interesting with it, and we just bide our time. Varieties come and go. As you see, like Eclipse, as time has come, that's sort of been in the system for a long time, 14, 16 years, and hopefully there's people at jonesing for the 033 to become more prominent. Great, thank you. This is sort of jumping around, but this beer in particular required cold storage and shipping, so it was important that it was kept cold at all times. Why is that? It's really important that hop-forward beers are cold stored. Obviously, a lot of where the flavour comes from in hops is from the oils. And like if you leave your butter on the kitchen bench at home or your olive oil on the kitchen bench at home for too long, it can go rancid and age really quickly if it's not appropriately stored. And so it's the same thing with beer, essentially. If you are, if it's got exposure to oxygen, or if it's not kept cold, you'll find that those hop aromas and hop oils essentially oxidise or are impacted by temperature and degrade much quicker than if you keep it cold. Now, obviously, this beer was using whole hop flowers, so the concentration of oils and was quite high, and it was very generous hop additions in this as well. So yeah, there's a lot of oils in there that could have potentially gone bad, and we wanted to make sure that everybody's beers were tasting as fresh and delicious as they were when they left the brew house. So that's the story behind cold storage, and it's also part of the reason why, as much as people might love to order big hazy IPAs from the States and stuff like that, you're actually better off supporting local, because you're going to get a better and fresher product buying products from Australia than you are purchasing something from the States. I mean, that's a very broad sweeping statement, but when you order something from the States, you don't know how it's shipped, you don't know when it was packed. There's a lot of variables in there that could potentially lead to you not getting a very fresh, delicious beer in your glass. So, those factors are really important, and it was really important with this beer. And I guess coming back to HPA and them breeding new hops and different varieties, what would your dream hop be, and what would it look like? What kind of flavours and aromas would it have? I mean, we've kind of touched on this already. We look for super fruit-forward flavours, but it is also kind of up to the punter, honestly. You get feedback from people when they drink your beers as to what they like and what they don't like. So ultimately, the consumer, my friends out here, are the ones driving what we might like to use next. I know that I haven't had a chance to use them yet, but there's some hops that mimic barrel character, which I think is really interesting. I'm a big fan of barrel-aged beers, so if I can mimic that flavour without having the expense of putting it in barrel, that's pretty cool.
I'd also love something that kind of lent into adjunct space. So like we might use vanilla or something in a pastry stout. It'd be really nice if we could get a super, vanilla, sweet vanilla flavour hop or something like that. HPA, can you hook me up with that in 12 years' time?
Just want to we'll find out later that Josh uses barrels a lot. Josh, what is your thoughts on hops that take away from that barrel process, I guess, in a way?
Oh, they're cool. They're cool.
Taking your job.
Yeah. Somebody made one, and I got to try it, and it was amazing. Like, quirkily weird turnaround times for a barrel. It was so vanilla, so barrel, and weird. Because, I knew it was only like 3 weeks old. But delicious.
Okay.
Sends
I
up
look
my
forward
way
to
too.
trying it.
So I think we have a question in the audience.
No. Yeah, it's on now. Thanks. So forgive my ignorance, and you might have touched on this a bit earlier, but what exactly makes a hazy, what is it? You're hazy. When you say like you're making a hazy beer, what makes it hazy?
Yeah, sure. So it's obviously down to recipe and additions. So we are looking for pretty high additions of wheat and oats in these styles of beer. We sort of, for ballpark home brewers, we start with kind of a 70-30 ratio. So we might be looking at 70% base malt, 30% oats and wheat. That obviously helps us have stable haze in solution. So the proteins and stuff that are produced or that are in those malts help us hold stuff in solution. Obviously, I was talking before about the importance of the dry hopping schedule. So if we are doing a dry hop while it's actively fermenting, we get that biotransformation process that I was talking about. That also really helps us hold a stable haze in solution. So this is kind of only a style we were kind of talking about how it's only happened in the last decade or so. I believe it's only just been introduced into the BJCP guidelines. But generally those styles are super hoppy, hazy and fruit forward. So yeah, the hop additions in there are really important, and the selection of hops that you're using as well. So.
Yeah, my question relates to a hop that you mentioned. Having grown up in and started drinking in the desert that was the Australia in the 1980s, you mentioned Pride of Ringwood.
Sure.
Is Pride of Ringwood Voldemort, or is it somebody that's been just misunderstood and overused?
Voldemort.
Where does it move in the future?
He who shall not be named. Sorry, Harry Potter fan. No, I mean, look, it's a long-standing product that a lot of us in the industry, I don't know, I still have a lot of respect for Pride of Ringwood. I think it was, one shakes his head, Cornell. Fair enough. I'm trying to be respectful, okay? It's a very well-known hop. It was a part of, it's all a part of the process, right? Like, we started here and now we're here. Pride of Ringwood has played a role in our movement forward, and we talk about hops such as this, which, might go commercial and be really well received, and Pride of Ringwood, plays a role in this, so...
It's a Leyland P76, not the VW.
Something like that, sure. It has a place. I don't know that it has a place in modern style beers, but feel free to go drink a VB if that's your jam.
All right, we've got another question down the back.
Hi. I've had a few of your beers and they've been fantastic, but we've been discussing this as a group back here, and we understand it's an experimental hop, but what's with the chlorine flavour on the back end? Is that the hop, or is something else gone sideways? Unfortunately, most of the cans back here have gone into a communal jug. We're just wondering, was that just the hop you haven't worked with, or is something else possibly gone wrong?
Brutal. All right. Yeah, all right, fair enough. Look, this is an experimental brew, and we had one shot at it. So we were given a month window and one set of hops to work with. The chlorophenolic flavour was not something that we noted on packaging. but it's definitely something I've noted this evening too. Thanks for pointing it out to the whole audience. Friend.
I wasn't trying to be vindictive. It's just we discussed it back here as a group.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just being sassy. It's in my nature.
And somehow I got put to the front to say something, so...
That's fair enough. Look, we have had these discussions because obviously we have noticed there's a little bit of a chlorophenolic flavour too. Firstly, let me say with a chlorophenolic flavour, it's a bit like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with diacetyl, everyone has different thresholds. So I don't think my threshold for chlorophenolic flavour is particularly high. To me, it's there, but it's not overpowering. But I have had feedback from other people that it's definitely present. So we're not entirely sure. We use filtration in our brew house, the best possible filtration we can get prior to installing an RO system. I don't know if you're familiar with RO systems, but they're very expensive. So it strips chloramine and chloride out of our chlorine out of our water, and we double filter. So it doesn't just go through one set of filters; it goes through two. So Adelaide water is very chlorine heavy. I don't know if anyone's drunk Adelaide tap water, but it doesn't taste real great. Yeah, just once. So we're not sure if this is a result of an interaction between Adelaide water, even though it's been double filtered, and the fresh hops. This is not something, and you said it yourself, you've drunk some of our beers, and it's not something that you've come across in our beers previously, and it's not something I've come across in our beers previously either. So is it an interaction between the double filtered water and the fresh hops? Is it the fresh hops themselves and perhaps the way they were stored, processed, delivered to us? That's probably a discussion I can have with HPA. There's lots of questions I have, and I don't have a solid answer for you, I'm afraid. The nature of this exercise is that we had one go at it and we've done the best we could in one shot. Is there an Eminem song? One shot, one opportunity or something?
So I think, that question has sort of opened a good insight into how a brewer would go troubleshooting a beer, or, if you create a brew and then something at the end has a flavour that you weren't expecting or isn't quite right, how do you go back in your steps? You explained you were thinking of water, or, well, I'm not particularly asking about this beer, but in general, when you're trying to troubleshoot a beer, what kind of steps do you go through?
We keep very good records. So the first place I would reach for is my brew data. I'd be looking at additions on the day, we'd be looking at water chemistry, we'd be looking at raw materials. So the other thing about this beer is that we were very kindly given some malt from Voyager, and but there's lots of experimental elements that are taking place in this beer, so it's very difficult for me to narrow down and point the finger at one specific element. So brew sheet, raw materials, we might go back to cleaning schedules and make sure that everything was thoroughly rinsed, which it absolutely was, because we have a very due diligent process in our brew house. We would then start looking at, packaging, DO numbers in packaging, any possible contamination in packaging. We'd be looking at our water, when were our filters last changed. We might be looking at batches of beer either side of the one that we've identified a problem with. Is the particular fault that we found in whatever said specific beer is present in batches before or after. I had a conversation, I won't name names, with a very dear friend of mine who works at a very well-known, very popular brewery, who also had a bunch of issues with chlorophenol flavours in a bunch of fruited sour beers. And they did the same process that we did, drilled right back down to their water, went back as far as the water source, and had conversations with the water treatment provider, or the water provider, about their treatment program. And it turns out they had changed the way they were dosing chlorine into the water system, and the way they were dosing chlorine into the water system for the general public had an input, had a negative outcome in this particular style of beer. And so this very well-known brewery had to dump 3 batches of this specific style of beer because it had a real chlorophenolic flavour. So it happens to the best of us, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're going to have a short intermission, about 15 minutes, so we'll see you back around 8:15.
Cast a long and delicious haze across the land. Eclipse was born. Eclipse is a new addition to the spectrum of Aussie flavour hops from the country's leading grower, HPA.
And from the bountiful hop gardens of Australia, an enticing beauty emerged. Magic with Ella, another spellbinding Aussie flavour hop from the country's leading grower, HPA.
Malt is the soul of every great beer and whiskey, and I think we often forget that these products start in the ground. Our families have been farming here in the Riverina for generations, and I guess it was just a natural progression, especially with myself and Brad and our passion for craft beer and spirits, to really want to be able to showcase the high quality grains that our families have been growing here in the region. We started Voyager to put that spotlight back on the farm and farmer, producing high quality, single origin artisan malts for craft brewers and distillers. We're really proud of the way in which we've innovated and brought the sustainable practices employed on our farm through to the custom design of our malt house. All our wastewater is able to be reused back to irrigate local crops. We've worked extensively with product designers to develop our biodegradable malt bags, and we're also utilising a fully sustainable carbon neutral heat source to kiln all of our malts. We're doing this through our integration with a biochar facility, which is turning local agricultural byproducts, things such as walnut shells and rice hulls, into biochar, which is an organic charcoal-based product that we're then able to utilise back into our soils to improve the quality of future crops. This approach is seeing us create the most sustainably produced malt in the world, right here on farm, and that's something that we're extremely proud of. One of the most rewarding aspects of malting for us is our collaboration with other farmers, brewers and distillers. We get really excited about the subtle differences we can recognise in different varieties that have been produced under different conditions, and we're passionate about how these differences impact on the final product. And to be able to share that journey with other artisans is such a great experience. Craft beer and spirits are a product of agriculture, provenance and also the people that craft them, and we're really proud and excited to play a part in this.
Strap in, load hop cannon, activate beer radar, engage afterburners, ready to play. Galaxy. To the stars with Galaxy, another high-scoring Aussie flavour hub from the country's leading grower, HPA.
You can now savour the Aussie flavour. Enjoyed by beer fans whose tastes are braver. A sweet sour gem that tastes of lychee and tropical fruits. Brewers all agree. Exotic, fragrant, grounded in earth creates a beer that's award-worthy. Shine bright with Topaz, a hop that dazzles. HPA grown, from brewers to bottle.
Auntie Carol likes big things. Big hair, big colours, big sunnies. Now she's setting off on holidays to discover her favourite big beer flavour. It's not big banana or big cherry. It's certainly not big prawn or big penguin. And no one enjoys fermented sheep. Auntie Carol's discovered that big beer flavour is a secret. Vic Secret. It's big on pine. It's big on pine apple. And it tastes like holidays. Thanks, Auntie Carol. Now we know. Discover Vic Secret, another great Aussie flavour hop from the country's leading grower, HPA. And on that day, an epic event occurred that cast a long and delicious haze across the land. Eclipse was born. Eclipse is a new addition to the spectrum of Aussie flavour hops from the country's leading grower, HPA.
And from the bountiful hop gardens of Australia, an enticing beauty emerged. Magic with Ella. Another spellbinding Aussie flavour hop from the country's leading grower, HPA.
Malt is the soul of every great beer and whiskey, and I think we often forget that these products start in the ground. Our families have been farming here in the Riverina for generations, and I guess it was just a natural progression, especially with myself and Brad and our passion for craft beer and spirits, to really want to be able to showcase the high quality grains that our families have been growing here in the region. We started Voyager to put that spotlight back on the farm and farmer, producing high quality, single origin artisan malts for craft brewers and distillers. We're really proud of the way in which we've innovated and brought the sustainable practices employed on our farm through to the custom design of our malt house. All our wastewater is able to be reused back to irrigate local crops. We've worked extensively with product designers to develop our biodegradable malt bags, and we're also utilising a fully sustainable carbon neutral heat source to kiln all of our malts. We're doing this through our integration with a biochar facility, which is turning local agricultural byproducts, things such as walnut shells and rice hulls, into biochar, which is an organic charcoal-based product that we're then able to utilise back into our soils to improve the quality of future crops. This approach is seeing us create the most sustainably produced malt in the world, right here on farm, and that's something that we're extremely proud of. One of the most rewarding aspects of malting for us is our collaboration with other farmers, brewers and distillers. We get really excited about the subtle differences we can recognise in different varieties that have been produced under different conditions, and we're passionate about how these differences impact on the final product. And to be able to share that journey with other artisans is such a great experience. Craft beer and spirits are a product of agriculture, provenance and also the people that craft them, and we're really proud and excited to play a part in this.
Strap in, load hop cannon, activate beer radar, engage afterburners, ready to play. Galaxy. To the stars with Galaxy, another high-scoring Aussie flavour hub from the country's leading grower, HPA.
You can now savour the Aussie flavour, enjoyed by beer fans whose tastes are braver. A sweet sour gem that tastes of lychee and tropical fruits. Brewers all agree. exotic, fragrant, grounded in earth creates a beer that's award-worthy. Shine bright with Topaz, a hop that dazzles. HPA grown from brewers to bottle.
Auntie Carol likes big things. Big hair, big colours, big sunnies. Now she's setting off on holidays to discover her favourite big beer flavour. It's not Big Banana or Big Cherry. It's certainly not Big Prawn or Big Penguin. And no one enjoys fermented sheep. Auntie Carol's discovered that big beer flavour is a secret. Vic Secret. It's big on pine. It's big on pine apple. And it tastes like holidays. Thanks, Auntie Carol. Now we know. Discover Vic Secret, another great Aussie flavour hop from the country's leading grower, HPA. And on that day, an epic event occurred that cast a long and delicious haze across the land. Eclipse was born. Eclipse is a new addition to the spectrum of Aussie flavour hops from the country's leading grower, HPA.
And from the bountiful hop gardens of Australia, an enticing beauty emerged.
So welcome back to Science Made Bearable's experimental science event. Hope you managed to have enough time to do what you need to do. Hopefully everybody here has in front of them the next beer, or they're getting passed around by our helpful volunteers. Mountain Culture's Belgian Hazy IPA. So this is for Australian craft beer fans. This brewery needs no introduction, but I will get Boogie from Mountain Culture, if he's paying attention, to introduce himself and Mountain Culture Brewery. Yeah, it should be on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's on. So I am Boogie. I run the brew pub at Mountain Culture. So where we started roughly about 3 years ago in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains, about 2 hours west of Sydney. Just started out as a brew pub. Weren't intending to package at all. Just everything in kegs served over the bar. And then bushfires happened, and then COVID happened, and somehow we grew, because that's how that works, right? So we've kind of developed ourselves into an IPA brewery, and last year opened a second production brewery about 45 minutes east of us, between Katoomba and Sydney and Emu Plains. I don't know.
Great. And so when we came to you guys and said, we've got 4 ingredients, which one would you like to choose? You chose yeast. So why was that?
We were making a lot of different IPAs, so I feel like it'd be kind of boring for us to take on hops. And it was also taken. Yeah. Thanks for making that easy. I don't know, yeast was, at least for me, like really interesting, kind of taking something that we're doing all the time and just using a completely different yeast strain that I don't think you would see terribly often with this style. And also selfishly, I want to start making more Belgian beers, and if I can get some Belgian yeast in and then reuse it for some more traditional stuff, that'd be cool. But yeah.
Yeah, so what was the experiment with this beer?
Right, so it's mostly that, using an unusual yeast strain for what's become kind of a commonplace style. It's kind of as simple as that. Just what if we just change this one small thing, which makes massive differences.
Yeah, so you're using a yeast, basically the wrong yeast is what you said on the can.
Yeah,
doing something that's pretty wrong.
Yeah.
But you think it works out pretty well?
I'm pleasantly surprised with it. I think we had a pretty good idea what to expect going into it. At least for me, I think it worked better than I thought it would. Just the character of the yeast surprisingly complements the hops really well. And kind of our approach on this is making I don't know, if you can't really use the word traditional with hazy IPA, but that's kind of what it's become, is a lot of malted oats, malted wheat, and then the hops we use are just Galaxy, Citra, and Mosaic, which have kind of become the standard trio. Yeah, the holy trinity of hops for hazies.
So what yeast would a hazy IPA normally use?
Generally an English strain. So you're still getting a bit of fruit-forward esters from those strains, but it's much more neutral, much cleaner. Really giving the hops the room to shine. And so that was kind of the big question, the 2 big questions with this yeast. Is is that going to get in the way of the hops? And also, I didn't really expect it to still be hazy. It's a very flocculating yeast strain, so that drops out really well. Generally producing really clear, bright beer. So it's kind of a relief, pouring it out tonight. It's oh, yeah, sweet, it's still hazy. Cool.
So flocculating, that's when the proteins and things in the beer are clinging together and dropping out of solution.
Yeah.
And so the yeast can impact that process?
Yeah, some yeast strains are more flocculent than others. They just... I'm not entirely sure why that is, but so it generally happens at the end of fermentation. Really when it's the yeast has run out of food, kind of just goes into a resting state, clumps together, drops to the bottom of the tank. which makes it really good for harvesting and reusing. So with our like English strains for the hazies, it can be a really big challenge. Collecting enough healthy yeast to repitch into another batch.
So you reuse yeast once you've done a brew.
Yeah.
If you're happy with it, you'll collect that yeast to use again.
Yeah. So obviously, if the batch is bad, that yeast goes down the drain. We never look at it again. And yeah, depending on the strain. So like the English strain that we use for hazies, we'll reuse up to about 10 to 15 times, depending. It's not consistently reusable. But like the Cali ale strain that we use for like pale ales in the West Coast, we can generally carry that a bit further. The Kolsch's that we use for a few beers, that goes forever. It's indestructible, it seems.
So it sounds like there's broad rules about what yeasts belong in what beers, and obviously the experiment here was to use the wrong yeast in a different style. You kind of touched on the fact that some yeasts flocculate better, and that might impact why you might use it. But why are there other rules around what yeasts belong in what beers, and why are there these rules?
I mean, I think mostly tradition. It's like it'd be a bit silly to use like an English or American strain or a Belgian strain for like a German lager, or vice versa. Though I guess cold IPAs are kind of changing that a little bit. But also especially regionally, Belgium has kind of their own group of yeasts that are very aggressive, very flavorful, and American ales yeast tend to be like very neutral, clean. So really, it's kind of just what you're looking for, and then you're also looking at how attenuative the yeast strain is going to be, how much of the fermentable sugar it's going to consume, how much alcohol it's going to produce. So, like for instance, with hazies, we usually want a good amount of residual sugar left to give it or to contribute to the body of the beer. This is a very attenuative, very dry strain. So, I mean, this fermented out to the levels of kind of what we see for lager. So it is a bit drier than most of our other hazies, but I think it still works.
Yeah, and you're still getting a really beautiful sweetness. I think it's coming from the yeast. It's kind of like a nice bubblegum flavour there.
Yeah. So that's less of the sugar than the esters that the yeast produces. Yeah. It's
so
crazy.
I think people who probably aren't super familiar with beer and brewing probably don't realise how much yeast contribute to the flavour of beer. I remember being very surprised learning about how the proportion that yeast actually contribute to the beer.
Yeah.
So what kind of flavours, I mean, when we think of yeast flavour, if you're not a brewer, you think, like taste of bread or that homebrewed disgusting yeast flavour that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But what kind of flavours are you seeking from yeast? Or what kind of flavours do brewers want to get out of their yeast and beer?
Yeah. So for this, I mean, really wanted that bubble gum. And then the yeast itself will produce a lot of citrusy flavors as well. But I don't know. I mean, I guess Hefeweizen yeast is that's a pretty easy one. That's very banana and clove. There's generally no fruit or actual spices added to those beers. It's the yeast contributing all that.
We have a question from online. So this is a question from Dave Booth. Would you compare this to your Scenic Route Session IPA?
Only in that it's a hazy hop forward ale.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. Yeah.
And then we've got another question from Will Tatchell. Shout out to a previous panellist from Van Diemen Brewer. Given the Belgian yeast, was this fermented warmer than the usual Mountain Culture IPA?
Yeah, it was. So for most with the English strain, we generally were hovering right around 20 degrees. I think I went up to 24 with this one, and that was really just to drive those yeast characters. Generally, the warmer the fermentation, the more expressive the yeast is going to be, and that works well with some yeast strains, not so well with others.
And so when we're talking about hops and brewers being interested in new varieties that they might want to mix up and experiment with, are you sort of doing that with yeast as well, or do you have your old favourites that you always stick with? And you're talking about cereal repitching because you obviously really like a yeast. Is that sort of more what brewers do, or do they like to bring in new types?
I think, like, at least in my experience, generally you have like a handful of yeast strains that you like really well, that you know what to expect, that they're reliable and consistent. And so like for us, we've got our English strain, we've got a Cali strain, we've got a lager strain, a Kolsch strain. But I mean, I think like with every other craft brewery out there, we like to experiment and get bored easily, and it's like, okay, yeah, like this sounds crazy. Like, what's gonna happen if we do that? And I think yeast strains coming, like new yeast strains coming on the market, happens way slower than anything else. I mean, there's only like a couple that I'm aware of that have come out recently, like Philly Sour, which is a lactic acid producing yeast strain, which is nuts. Found in a graveyard in Philadelphia.
Featured last year, actually, in Spotty Dog's beer.
Yeah, just pretty spooky, but yeah, I mean, apart from that, like, there's not, at least lately, there hasn't been a lot of progression in what's available, which is fine. I mean, there's so much out there. You know, like dozens and dozens of versions of English strains, probably more in Belgium, but.
I have a question about reusing yeast, multiple generations. So, you know, you said that you take it from the troop and you use it within the next batches. How do you kind of keep track of how those yeasts are going? You know, how many are live cells, etc.
Right.
And what might be the implications of poor yeast, or if you pushed it too far?
Right. Yeah. So. Generally, we're keeping track, and this is pretty standard. You're looking at the viability of the yeast, which is kind of comparing the amount of dead cells with live cells. The basic, cheap way to do that is add a bit of dye, chuck it on a plate, and look at it under a microscope. There's also complicated machines that are very expensive that can do that for you. So yeah, we're paying a lot of attention to the health of the yeast as we're pulling it out of a batch, and also as we're adding it to a new one. So if it's looking pretty poor, it's like, right, yeah, we just not even a bother. Which I guess leads to your second question. It's like if the yeast is really unhealthy, generally you're just going to get a stuck fermentation. It's just not going to ferment out all the way. You're going to end up with a lower ABV, very sweet beer. Which is not fun if it's not intentional.
Sorry, can I follow up to that? What do you do if that happens?
We generally dump those batches, which is, very sad.
So we have another question online from Jordan Turner. Did you profile what sort of water you used for this brew?
Not really. So we kind of stuck with our rough base NEPA recipe, so water included. We didn't really change anything in terms of process, except for the yeast. Trying to be kind of scientific about it, right? One variable at a time.
And is this something we could expect from Mountain Culture to continue, or you keep using Belgian yeasts in your brews?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm not sure if it's going to show up or at least regularly show up in hazy IPAs, but I'm very much a fan of old school, traditional, like old world beers. I over romanticize them probably, so definitely want to do like triples, quads, plenty of Abbey ales, and hopefully get in the saisons as well. But
great. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yeah, someone it's at Clint from Spotty Dog, actually, previous panelist. Can't help himself talking about yeast.
He probably needs to piss.
Actually, Michelle wants to ask this question. Michelle, would you like to ask now?
Hi, I just wanted to know what yeast strain you guys were using.
For this was from Bluestone and Vic. It was the I want to say it's the Antwerp strain from them, which I believe is more or less the Vesmol strain, one of the Trappist breweries in Belgium.
So these Belgian yeast strains and these old world strains that you're talking about, they are literally the same yeast that they have taken from, you know, a monk's bedroom or wherever once upon a time. Are they still?
It's totally possible. Yeah, I mean, I know, especially with like the Belgian stuff, like so many of those breweries bottle condition their beers, so it's been a thing for a while. Especially with home brewing, is right. You buy a bottle of this particular Belgian beer, save the yeast at the bottom, grow it up, throw it into a batch. I'm not totally sure where these the like proper yeast propagators are coming by these strains, but I assume by honest means.
And going back to what you talked about, how there's surprisingly few new yeast varieties coming out for you guys to use compared to things like new malt varieties or hops. It's kind of surprising because yeast have the shortest generation lifespan. Generation, you can breed yeast within a day in a petri dish. So
yeah.
It's quite surprising that you guys aren't getting like a billion new varieties thrown at you all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's. I mean, I think maybe the exception is with, and I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about it in a bit, but with like mixed culture beers, it's, you know, especially when you're not deliberately pitching a specific yeast strain or collection of strains or collection of yeast and bacteria. I don't know. There's just so much that can pop up. I know, like, especially like spontaneous fermentation. I know, like Cantillon, one of the more famous lambic breweries, they somewhat recently tested their house culture and had no idea what was in it, and just like found that there were hundreds of different species of yeast and bacteria. It's like, so I mean, I think you're right. Like, there's a lot of opportunity to go out there and find new yeast. But I mean, like, the last big, I don't know, like eventful moment in yeast was like when lager was discovered. That's a fairly new yeast strain. I don't think anything that substantial has happened since then. It was like, what, like 600 years ago or something like that?
It's also not so romantic to, you know, a scientist to breed a new yeast strain. It's like way cooler for it to be discovered that it came from, an oak barrel in Argentina or something crazy. I think we have another question. Oh, there's one down the back first. Whoever has the mic.
Yeah, it's me. Hi. First time caller, long time listener. Forgive me for my ignorance, but I've never come across this yeast harvesting situation in my life before, and I'm stuck on the spooky graveyard yeast. Do you actually harvest from the nature? How do you get the yeast?
It does happen. I've not done it personally. So yeah, like us and I would say most commercial breweries are buying yeast that have been cultured and grown up from yeast labs.
That's
so they'll
what
have,
I would expect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you can wild harvest yeast.
Yeah, you
Wow.
absolutely can.
Okay.
Yeah. Which, yeah.
Do you know
that's
what
pure
the
mad
process
science.
is? Are we talking like a scraper off the gravestone? Is it a posthumous excavation? Well, where is the yeast coming
why not
from?
both?
It's
I mean, yeah, like you could just like swab, like
Or
you can go outside and
is
swab
there a-
anything. There's probably yeast on there.
Do you apply a medium to a
Yeah.
surface and just see what grows, like a stick a petri dish
Yeah.
and come back later?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. And I don't have a lot of experience doing it myself, but yeah, you can buy a specific medium that will really only work with like a Saccharomyces strain, which is brewer's yeast.
Fascinating. I do have a
And Brett.
secondary
Yeah, wild yeast.
question. I've got a secondary question to that.
Okay.
Do you like whether I know that there's like a starter culture for sourdough bread? is there such a like it sounds like your recycling of your yeast strains is similar to like a starter culture where you go that's the goodness. So a good sourdough, they've like kept the starter culture and growing over time. Is there a similar thing in the beer making process where you can have like a starter culture?
I mean, yeah,
like
I think it's effectively the same, right? Like we've got yeast that we want to keep using. We just keep feeding it, right? I don't know. Yeah, it will like evolve and mutate over time, which is why we can only reuse certain strains for so long. But
this might be a bit of a left field question because I'm going to go more into sourdough. Do you know much about sourdough?
I tried starting a sourdough culture once. It did not end well.
Okay.
Which is very embarrassing for me.
I guess I was just wondering why sourdough we have, people have it forever. Like, you have generations old sourdough, but then the yeast, you were saying you can only use malt, like, it's the same? You get a microphone there, Cornell. Go. No, it'll go once
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but you mentioned Cantillon before, and we talk about all these Belgian Trappist breweries and some of the oldest breweries around that are still brewing in giant wooden, fermenting vessels, and that's the exact same concept. Those breweries, they don't get fresh yeast from anywhere. They have their fermenters. Their fermenters are their yeast source. It lives in there. They empty them out. They fill it with fresh wort, and the stuff that's still stuck to the wood keeps fermenting the beer. And it's like yeast will mutate over generations, and they'll change. And if you're getting a pure, like ale strain to ferment a clean modern ale, it's going to start acclimatising to the beer, changing what it does, using the nutrients differently over successive generations, producing flavours that we don't want in that beer style. But those hundreds of years old beers, they've already done that. They've kind of formed a mixed culture of, like you said, hundreds of different species of yeast and bacteria and whatever, and they're in an equilibrium of a particular level. They've all kind of learned to live with each other in a certain way, ferment the beer a certain way, produce certain flavours, and they just keep doing that. And there's mutation within that, but it's that fight has already happened. And that's the same concept with sourdough, that you get one that works and produces the flavour you want. It kind of hits this equilibrium of flavour, and then you just keep using it and feeding it and using it and feeding it, and over time it becomes stable. That's kind of the concept. Somewhat.
Yeah.
Topher's ruling. Yeah.
Also, don't feel like you're jumping in. We want you all to contribute to this conversation. Like it's
If you want to. Yeah. So everyone knows Wildflower. Wildflower started by doing a base culture of Saison and then putting flowers in all these different jars. And Topher talks about how he had so many jars in his lounge room, and he just went along and tasted them and found the ones that tasted amazing and then tipped them together, and that's Wildflower's culture and where he gets his name from. So I can't remember how long ago back, but that culture started and was amazing for X amount of years, and I think a year ago it started to go off in a direction that he didn't like, so he then had to start again and try and get that Wildflower culture going again. So it was just got off flowers, and it did go down the wrong direction that he didn't like, so he then had to pull it back to something that he liked.
Just with Wildflower, sometimes in his Instagram posts and discussions we've had, you'll see him use whole flowers. So he'll go out, I think he has a beer called, I know he has a beer called Wattle Drops, that he goes out and harvests, whole wattle flowers and blends that as a part of the process.
Just like that and Banksia are the two.
Yeah, so Wildflower, go and check them out if you haven't already.
All right, I think we're ready to move to the next beer, which is Black Arts Dark Saison. We do have a comment on the live stream saying that the background chatter's making it a little bit difficult to hear. So for the sake of all those beautiful viewers at home, try and keep it down. Maybe text each other or something. I don't know. But let's crack open the last beer of the night. So while we're doing this, Josh, you guys are a small, conscious, family-run brewery based in the west side of Melbourne. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started the brewery?
Not on? There we go. Like lots of brewers, you start home brewing and then slowly find your way and weasel your way into a brewery somewhere and learn how to do it commercially and then kind of start your own thing. This is kind of a side project that's got way out of hand, and thanks to my lovely wife, this is still going. And we just make beers that I really kind of love and that I didn't find in the marketplace to begin with. So I wanted to make a beer that no one else really made.
And we're very, very happy for it. So you picked malt for your ingredient. You did have the choice out of malt and water, and you went with malt.
Yeah, I know nothing on water.
So why did you choose malt?
Yeah, I don't know too much on water, and like brewing saison styles is more about malt and hop. And we use Voyager already, so we could talk to Stu and kind of cook up something really delicious, and this is kind of what we came up with.
Yeah, so tell us about the experiment. What were the conversations with Stu, and what did you decide on?
I went through their list of malt and found something that I hadn't used before, and something that was pretty old. So it was a choice between this and a 5,000-year-old varietal, and this one was the 3,000 Tibetan, purple, and huskless. And I was like, sick. Yeah, game on. Yeah, so that's why I went down that route. And so the concept was being no husk, so bitterness was always going to be low in my beer. So I was like, yeah, dark saison. So I didn't know whether Stu could roast super small batches for us, but I was like, can you do it in a Pils, roast it in a Cara, and also in a chocolate malt? And yeah, I did a straight 100% Tibetan, and then I did one with 25% Pils, so organic Pils, and that way I could get my husk in there and trying to have a nice lauter. And yeah, it's the 25% Pils, organic Pils version. So it kind of gives this nice little sweetness going on and nutty, milky, chocolatey. Yeah, it's super yum.
So you mentioned there, I guess, roasting the different malts to chocolate and I think, I don't actually know what you said, maybe dark crystal or something. That's like specialty malts. That's what gives us this colour. But even like before that, what is malting? Like what are we doing to get that sugar out of malt to feed those yeast?
It's starting the actual seed of growing the plant to germinate. So it starts to change the starches in the grain and then converts it into the process of starting to grow. And then at that point, the malter goes in and starts drying it, roasting it, changing the moisture content. And then depending on what they want to make in the malt, they then roast it for different temperatures, times, and moisture content. So lots of Pils and pale malt, and then some of the specialties, which I'm kind of just touching on. But Stu has the mic somewhere if he wants to talk about this particular malt.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Stu is. Oh, there he is. Stu, do you want to touch on the malting process anymore? Maybe. I don't know where the floating microphone is. Have you got it, Reed? Oh, it's coming. Okay, we'll get Stu to touch on it. Stu's from Voyager. Well, one of our wonderful sponsors for the night, along with Hop Products Australia and National Science Week.
So same yours.
Hey, I'm Stu from Voyager. Look, the malting process is pretty simple. We trick grains into growing, and we grow them for about 4 days, and then we stop them from growing by drying them out. And as Josh alluded to, we stop them from growing by kilning them and heating them, and based on the temperature that we heat them and how long we heat them for determines the flavour profile in the finished malt. So this one, as Josh said before, has got chocolate malt, which is one that we very similar to coffee beans. We roast them in a coffee roaster, and we stop them when they start showing those kind of darker coffee flavours.
Just while Stu's got the microphone too, because we had a bit of a chat about this, Josh, and we weren't fully sure. So you used a 3,000-year-old Tibetan purple barley in this beer. I don't get to understand exactly what that means. What's the story behind it, and why it's purple? Do you know?
No.
Okay, that's good that Stu has the microphone still. Stu, can you please elaborate on what 3,000-year-old Tibetan purple barley means?
Yeah, sure. So Australia grows about 9 million tonnes of barley. 8 million is exported, predominantly to make very clean, dry, crisp lagers in Asia. And of that million tonne that stays in Australia, the majority of that is also made into very dry, clean, crisp lagers or commercial, VB and those styles of beer. So a lot of the barley varieties, like any agricultural commodity, have been bred to suit plenty of things: yield, processability, drought tolerance, disease resistance, all these great things. But particularly in barley, and I liken it to tomatoes, where you go into Coles and Woolies and you can grab a tomato off the shelf and bite into it, and it's hard and crunchy and tastes more like a potato than it does a tomato that you've grown yourself. And barley is no different. So for us, where new barley varieties are bred for conventional farming systems that do yield really well, process really well, but can be devoid of flavour, means for us to find these varieties, we go back in time. So in Horsham in Victoria, there's the Australian Seeds Gene Bank, and they house, I think it's 30,000 different varieties of grains from all around the world. And you can write a submission to them to get a small packet of seeds like you would from going to Bunnings, and you plant them in a pot plant and you harvest them with scissors, and then you plant them in a bit larger area, and then you plant them in a smaller paddock and a bit bigger paddock, and then 10 years later you have a commercial quantity of barley that you can get to brewers like Josh to have a play with and see what they reckon. And the purple barley was one of the oldest that they had that still had some connection to Australia. It had actually been harvested from Australia, this certain strain, which originated in Tibet 3,000 years ago, but this particular strain was harvested in Victoria in the early 1800s. And it looks and grows phenomenally different to any commercial barleys. It is vibrant purple in colour. It doesn't have a husk, but it's very difficult to grow. It's very difficult to malt, but it does have a really unique, earthy, nutty, miso kind of character to it. And we're stoked to see that Josh was keen to have a play with it in this beer.
So are we. So I guess on that, you mentioned the husk-free kind of element of it, and that's something you touched on too. And you did say that you had a Pils malt, which did mean there was some husk in there, but I guess typically in a normal beer, there's quite a bit of husk, and husk probably plays quite an important role. What kind of role does husk play when you're brewing, and did you have any kind of implications of not having all that husk there?
Compared to our normal brew that we do, not really. We brew with a lot of husk-free. So, yeah, lots of oats. So we get stuck mashers if we don't control what it looks like. The husk actually helps in the lauter and helps filter out the beer in the whole mashing process. And, yeah, this one, when I tried the 100%, I did have to put rice hulls in it to try and get it to go, and got the ratio pretty good, but the flavour profile was a lot drier and I wanted a bit more sweetness in there, so yeah, I went down the other route.
So I guess on that, you mentioned stuck mash, and maybe the word even mash might be new to quite a few of our viewers. Can you briefly touch on the mashing process and what exactly is going on there, and also what is a stuck mash?
So mashing process is taking your milled grain. So you crush the grain once it's actually been through the malt house, and then you crush it so it's open, and then you add hot water to it, and depending on the temperature of the hot water, depends on the strain and varietals of sugars that you end up in the end work. And those sugars then impact mouthfeel and how the yeast actually consumes and how much of the sugar the yeast consumes, which is mouthfeel again. So this one was mashed fairly low in temp. So we're hitting 66, 65. And there I would get a lot of easy, accessible sugars so that the yeast can go in and munch away and make a really nice, dry saison. Yeah, so that's the concept of mashing. It normally happens like an hour, single infusion, you hold it at 65, but there's many other processes of mashing, decoctions and turbids. But nowadays, you don't have to worry about those because there's heavily modified malts, so you don't have to follow the turbid or decoctions. And yeah, this one came through nicely. So a stuck mash is when it gets too stodgy and it stops flowing, and you have to fix it or dump it.
How do you fix it?
Yeah, just wait, stir. Like if you're waiting for a long period on your beers like I do, yeah. So, yeah, try and nail it to begin with.
Okay. I guess touching on Saison, so which this is, Black Hearts is pretty openly inspired by Belgian beers. I think it's on your website. I think it might be the first thing it says on the website even. What kind of inspires... Why do Belgian beers inspire you? And, why did you decide to make a Saison? Like, everyone else kind of went ale, lager...
I don't think my brew space will allow me to make a nice clean beer. So, yeah. I went a Saison because most of my primary ferments are on a Saison, so I know that fairly well. I just built a couple of 300-litre barrels into Burton Union system, so it'd kick all my trub off and give me a nice clear finished primary. So I was like, yeah, this would be sick to put through those barrels and get like a nice soft barrel character kind of in the background, as well as that soft because of the actual hydrostatic. So they went through there, and then I moved them into a secondary just to kind of clarify a little and sit. And then we ran out of time, so I had to can and move it through. And it was a little bit higher in final gravity than I wanted, so I then had to pasteurize this beer.
So you're talking about barrels there, and you said primary, secondary. A lot of language there that maybe I don't fully understand. So let's break it down. So start with primary fermentation was in stainless?
No, it was in the oak.
Oh, right. So it went all fermented in barrel.
Secondary was in stainless.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
Backwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more about, I guess, barrel kind of fermentation and what the benefits and why start in barrel before going to stainless?
I've been playing around with making a Saison as part of our core and trying to get something that has very low pressures on the actual yeast itself to try and bring out that like true Saison flavour profile. So most conicals are really tall, and you've got the pressure of the liquid on top pushing down on the yeast, so it starts to like morph the yeast in the flavour profile. So all the proper Saison brewers are making them in big fat boy tanks. So I was like, sick, barrel on the side, I'm going to get less hydrostatic pressure on it. Barrels are cheap, I've got heaps of them, so let's just drill some holes and turn it into a fermenter. And yeah, they were like ex-Shiraz, nicely emptied, so I was like, dark beer, Shiraz barrel, nice soft, Saison, sick. And yeah. And then I knew I had to pasteurize because I was like, I don't know whether this is going to explode. So...
we've got a question online from Dave Booth. It says, this flavour screams Black Forest pastry stout. Would it translate into a creamy, heavier version? So are you going to add lactose to it?
No. Yeah. I don't like lactose in beers.
I'll put that out there. Doesn't Boogie put a bit of lactose in his...
He doesn't like it either.
Yeah, no. That's a punter's push, not a brewer's push. Yeah. Yeah, that's punters looking for sweetness and more sugar. But I've definitely played with like how to do that without kind of doing that. Yeah.
Tell us more.
I'm like, all right, how do I do barrel-aged showers with that kind of feel and vibe to get our beers a bit more accessible to the people that like hazy, sweet, super fruity IPAs? And yeah, I was like, if I just like put a whole bunch of vanilla beans in there, a kilo in this barrel, it should be pretty sweet. To be continued.
Okay, so it's in barrel at the moment, you're saying?
We'll see whether that works out or whether that goes down the sink.
All right, we'll watch for your next release.
Yeah.
So saison traditionally is like a farmhouse ale. It's different to any of the beers we've had so far, and that's traditionally because of the yeast that's used. So again, back to yeasts. What kind of yeast did you use for this beer?
This one's just the classic, like B134.
I don't know what that means.
Easily accessible, like dry saison yeast.
This is saison yeast. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, question in the audience somewhere.
Just here. Obviously, beers have changed. Just to your left. Yeah, there you go. Obviously, beers have changed a lot over the last 15 years. I'm just interested to know, where do you see, I guess, the new frontier on beer in the next 10 years, and which of the 4 ingredients do you reckon is really going to lead that? Which one do you guys enjoy experimenting the most with, between the 4?
This is a very good question. I think all 4 brewers will have to answer this. So whoever wants to go first can go first.
Yeah, you want to go?
Oh, definitely water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The others have all been, used too much. So, yeah, I think water's the new frontier. Yep.
Well, I did actually notice, for example, on a lot of beers, like Shapeshifter, for example, you guys mentioned malt, hops, and yeast. The malt, hops, and yeast that you use in the beer. No mention of the water profile. Is that the next thing that you're going to add to the can? That wasn't a dig, by the way. Sorry. Josh?
Yeah. I wish I could say yeast, but I'm not feeling it. I'm thinking still hops. But also 10 years is hard to predict. Yeah.
Boogie?
Just did it. Barrels. Yes, barrels. Yeah, wood.
Let's see if we can get Adelaide's water better, and then we were joking about how we should all say water because Cornell's been so passionate about water. But I think personally it's probably yeast. I know for me when I started brewing, understanding, and you kind of touched on it before as well, Kelsey, the importance that yeast plays out and the impact that it has on flavour is not something that the average punter really understands. But yeah, it's not until you get into pro brewing that you're like, oh wow, and I think that's, and you were talking about the quick turnaround, and I think that's probably, I want to say yeast.
Hello. There we are. I think I've heard the statistic, and I'm not sure this is true, but I think it is. It's up to 40% of flavour within beer comes from yeast, and we just don't really consider it that much. Do we have any more questions from the audience? And there can be questions to any beer too. It can be, you don't have to stick to this beer. Okay, we're going down here.
Yeah, a quick one on yeast, actually, that I wanted to ask was, for any homebrewers out there, my journey was, it was can, yeast thing on top, white brain sugar, horrible times, learn, find that hops exist, do a bit of stuff with that. But yeast really was behind all of that. So what would you what would any of the panel recommend as a homebrewer has come to the point where they go, I want to try and work with yeast. I want something new, but I want something stable, I want something reliable, I want something that maybe will drive, even if I'm not doing it the best I can be, will give me the result that it has on the packet. What would you guys recommend?
I think the very first thing that every home brewer brewing from a can should do is chuck the packet of yeast off that comes with the can in the bin. That's rubbish. chuck it away. Hey? Yeah, make some bread with that yeast. Find a good homebrew shop, like one where the proprietor knows what they're doing and knows what they're talking about and gets fresh product in, and get some fresh yeast that's been kept in a fridge that has a use-by date on it. Get fresh yeast. That's number one. And care about that before anything else. Like before you care about water, hops, malt, anything else, care about yeast. Yeast is easily the most important thing in taking a shitty homebrew up to a good homebrew. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like if you think of, you know, gross to amazing commercial, most of that range is yeast. The rest is, you know, makes up the difference. So get good yeast and control your fermentation. If you can do those two things, and really, number one tip for like control fermentation is temperature control. If you can do that, get fresh yeast and control your temperature of your fermentation, you're most of the way to making a good beer.
I absolutely agree. 2 points though, if you're home brewing, cleanliness is also super important, and I think that's not... Yes, I know, I'm here to ruin everyone's fun, but it's also very important, and we often joke, and I know the boys will agree with me, that 80% of a brewer's job is cleaning. Yeah, so cleanliness is super important. Interesting yeast strains are also available in smack pack like quantities, like home brew size quantities from the States. You can get all sorts of interesting stuff. If you want to look into yeast, it's easy to find. Just go looking for it. We've had some really fun stuff from Escarpment Labs in the States recently. Go have a look at them. Yeah, so cleanliness and then yeast.
Just a quick reminder, as we go to the next question in the audience, noise levels in the audience. We'll keep them low. Keep them low. I know that alcohol makes everyone talk more, but when we finish, we can all have a great big chat. But for now, for the at-home viewers, let's keep it down. Hear a pin drop. Let's go. No, not yet. Sorry. No, audience question?
There we go, now. Okay, so another one about yeast. Okay, so you mentioned how yeast can morph quite quickly, right? So you talked about the wildflower yeast and how it changed quite quickly over the years. Now, I've been to Heineken, right? And they claim, I can't say how true this is, but they claim that they've been using the same yeast strand for hundreds of years. How possible is this? And can you comment on how one would keep the same yeast strand going for hundreds of years?
Yeah, I think with when you're using a single organism, which like most clean production breweries or commercial breweries are, so we're using one specific yeast strain at a time. So with Heineken, they've likely and almost certainly banked that strain. So they've got, it's frozen. Anytime that they need to get a fresh batch of that yeast, they can grow it or anticipate that. It's like, okay, we're gonna need that in 3 weeks or whatever, and just pull that out of the freezer. Just grab a couple cells, grow it up a little bit, grow it up a little bit more, grow it up a little bit more, throw it into a proper batch, and still have this reserve that's going to be safe and pure for as long as they want it to be.
But then you've also got Heineken produce wort that is the same IBU, has the same gravity every time. So that yeast is going to perform very much the same because it is the same continual thing. And then they've got multiple tanks at different stages of ferment. So when they finish this batch and it goes to tank, they've got a tank that's all ready to harvest and pump onto this one. And then that whole process is streamlined. So if you start tweaking with your IBU on your next IPA that you make, or you change the malt bill, then that is going to morph the yeast that you used last time and pitched into that, and then you do it again and it's going to morph again. Whereas if you're just making that same consistent thing, it makes it very easy to keep that strain consistent.
I think we've got heaps in the audience. Let's go. Tom,
you didn't have to name me.
Sorry. You might say something bad now, and I've just...
Hey, Tom.
Sorry, Tom.
I'm Tom. All right, I'm Tom.
Tom's a brewer from Little Green Men up in Deloraine.
I'm from Deloraine. My name's Tom. Now, all right, my question to the panel is, across the board, because you're all like various around the country, where do you think beer's going? Like, what do you think? What's the next thing? Is it hops? Is it water? Is it just to keep it sciencey? Is it hops? Is it water? Is it whatever? Yeast? That's I think.
It's definitely wood.
Wood.
There's a lot to experiment with there.
And someone walked away from me with the microphone first. We can have a chat about this. No, but seriously.
Just want to take it back, craft beer only takes up a portion of the market, really, so far. Lots of people are still drinking VB or...
VB are going to have to sponsor us next year. They've got a lot of mentions.
They have, but it's...
They'll be on the panel next time.
But not in a good way, Matt.
So, sorry, can I put the caveat out there that I own a pub where we sell a lot of VB and a lot of 4X?
Oh, it's definitely got its place.
Point being, so you've just backed me up perfectly in that what I'm saying is I want to see a shift from mass-produced shitty beers to more craft beer. Let brewers like us have more of a play and enjoy our jobs and engage in new products, and let HPA and Voyager and all of our sponsors get crafty and make new things that we can play with, and then the punter comes in and they're like, this is delicious, or you shat the bed on this one, or... Sorry, excuse the language. But I hope the shift in the market goes from the mass production to the small-scale experimental, and that gives us more opportunities to have these kinds of conversations, and also more opportunities as brewers to brew these kind of fun beers where we get to pull random things out and have a go. So let's hope the shift goes from mass-produced to craft.
Great point.
I just want to follow on from that. I feel like, it's not about the shift from what's being produced, it's about what drinkers are drinking. And so would any of you have advice, if your uncle is a diehard VB fan, won't touch any of that craft beer crap because it tastes like flowers and
I just want a normal beer.
What do you suggest for us who, obviously everybody here loves craft beer, or will now, how do we help our friends and family break into the craft beer market?
Start them on something close to what they're used to and then step them in the direction of other delicious things is my advice, but...
Yeah, I'm really bad at this. Neither of my parents drank beer until 2 years ago. And I was trying for years to it's like, you just have to. I mean, I do this for a living. My mom's a massive wine drinker. So okay, right. Sour beer, Saison, Belgian stuff, that makes the most sense. She ended up liking double IPAs. I never would have guessed. My dad's also just hopeless. So I don't know. Just maybe get him to try a bit of everything. I don't know. It's I've... With at least in that, I could never have predicted that. Yeah. Education.
Like these events.
Yeah. But I love beer because beer can taste like so many different things. You can find beers that taste like cider, like whiskey, and it's such a huge world. And amazing. I can mix wine into my beer and be like, check it out, guys, this is a beer. And a winemaker cannot add beer to wine and say, look at that, I made a beer.
Totally agree. I think that question is really about, it's almost about the art side, right? This is all science, but what you're asking is about the art. What are people where's it going to go in 10 years? We have no idea. We're just going to keep experimenting. And when people, as a group, like what we're doing, we're going to make more of that shit. That's the basic answer. Why are hazies huge now? Because a couple of breweries did something stupid, in terms of process. It was a thing that no one else was doing. They kind of experimented. They went, let's add more hops, let's add more hops, let's add more hops, oh shit, the line was back there, you know, and ended up with these beers that did a certain thing and tasted a certain way, and everyone loves them, and so now everyone's making them. So we don't know. We're just going to keep playing, experimenting, using the science to make new things and ignoring the science sometimes. Like kind of just going, I'm going to do something that is stupid, is abnormal, is, you know, kind of experimental. And if it works, it's really going to work.
It's a great answer. And I mean, we shouldn't say that science doesn't have a certain level of art to it either. Like, there's so much creativity behind science in general. So we have more questions in the audience. I can see hands everywhere. Can we have the audience microphone on?
It's me again. Hi. Hi. So when you were talking about the barrels that had the multi-generational yeast that had adapted and gone through the fight and they established the balance, I was reminded of the microbiome of gut flora, right? And I do remember a theory from a naturopath that was that basically because there is a gut-brain connection, not very well studied, but slowly we're getting here. But so imagine that the gut bacteria is like addicted to a certain strain of beer. So like their theory was basically that some alcoholics were just that like their gut flora was addicted to Tooheys New, right? And I think that is a genuine premise that say people are like, I only drink Tooheys New because it's not their brain or their mouth that's addicted. It's like the gut flora actually override all their other basic senses, right? But nowadays we are so much more diverse in our tastes and we want different experiences. We don't get stuck in that way. Like, we don't drink 10 years of Tooheys New and then get stuck on it. We go, oh, no, we'll try all the things. All the things. So that's where we get the different flavours. And by the way, this dark beer is really quite delicious. Josh, wasn't it? Fucking top notch.
It's a good beer.
I have one more point to make, which was that you never told me where in the graveyard you got the yeast from. Come on. I have to know. The people want to know.
I'm not ready to talk about that.
I want to know. You dug it up, didn't you? It's only grave robbing if you take their wedding ring.
All right, let's, before Boogie gets taken by the police for grave digging or something, we had a question from online, from Dave Booth, which is a really good one, actually, and it's probably a question that a lot of us ask as craft beer lovers. Is there a key element to make small batch craft beer more reasonably priced? Because I'd love to spend the money for good beer. But what kind of things can we do, or what is the reason that beer in craft beer is so expensive?
Talk to the ATO would be my advice. We are taxed. There's a whole different set of tax that goes on wine compared to craft beer based on ABV. So if you're over a certain percentage, then you get a different tax bracket than those of us who are producing beer do. Also, the nature of craft beer is that we pay for small batch craft ingredients, and it's quite labour intensive because, you know, we're managing 1,000 litres versus, you know, a much larger batch than that. I don't know what Cooper's produces in a day, but it's a bunch more than I do. Bunch more than anybody here does. And so the costs associated with that, their equipment would allow them to send 1 million, I don't know, however many litres through the system with maybe 2 people operating that system, whereas it takes 2 people to operate our system as well, but we get 1,000 litres at the end of the day, so...
whatever goes into it, whatever is built into that price, however it's broken down, I can promise you that a multinational brewery or a large brewery, with all their staff, with all their overheads, with all their equipment, with all of the stuff that they have to pay for, I can almost guarantee that they will be making more profit per case at whatever price they're selling it than we are.
We got another audience question.
First would quickly be when is Black Hops going to make a bad beer? But other than that, going back to hops, everyone's always talking about isomerization of hops. And I had to go down a bit of a rabbit hole myself to actually find out what is going on with isomerization. But does anybody want to give a good explanation of exactly what happens when a hop becomes an isomer and why that actually changes the flavour of the compound?
Is Alex Graham putting his hand up?
I feel like
panelists?
HPA should answer this.
HPA?
HPA want to take it? I can't. Yeah, go.
Sure. Everyone's aware of the alpha acids in hops.
Maybe. You might have to elaborate a little bit.
So it's the bittering component, I suppose, or the resin in the hops as opposed to the essential oils, which all the craft brewers love and put in the end in their dosing. So the percentage of the alpha will sort of give you IBUs. But to achieve the sort of bitterness perception, it's got to be boiled. And so when you isomerize something, the chemistry, the formula, it's not the formula, the CHs and all that, etc. It's essentially identical, but the configuration changes during the boil. And so in an isomerization, they take your pellets and they'll add, catalyst, magnesium oxide, and they'll heat treat it, kind of like... a quick reaction, and so it's all ready to dose straight into your tanks without essentially the boil. I don't know how they liberate it.
I agree with that.
No, it's a great...
Yeah.
It's a very complex science, the isomerization. It's a complex word to say after 4 beers. We're going to have one more question from online. I know there's so many questions, but, the brewers will be hanging around. Come have a chat afterwards, or if you're online, we'll send them in. We'll pass them on to the brewers and get answers. But one of the questions we got here from TJ Bryan is, were there any what-ifs or could-have-beens in the process for any of the brewers? Any ideas what this night left off the cutting room floor? So what do you think could have been pushed further? Is there anything, we focused on the 4 ingredients. Was there something that we didn't think about? I mean, we have had mention of wood, which we didn't actually explore too much. So is there elements that we need to...
5 brewers next year, one that does wood. That's
Okay,
where it's all heading.
We need the funk brewer, that's what you're saying.
All right, so
was it about... Where are you, TJ? Was it about what we would have done differently in our beers, or if there's anything as a group that we wish we could have explored?
Were these all first passes? Or were these all first passes, or...
No, we brewed 10 of these and picked the best one.
That's my question. Are these all things you would have gone with, or would you have preferred to maybe... Was there something you put on the shelf where you thought maybe wasn't going to fit this?
No, from our point of view, I'm assuming you guys all did the same thing. We went, this sounds fun, let's do a thing. How long have we got? Oh, shit, quick, let's brew something.
Yeah, correct.
Fair. Look,
go quickly. We're taking space now.
And ours was like, oh yeah, we'll do this thing. We had a chat about it. Oh, we'll brew a lager. That's awesome. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Oh, it needs to lager. Oh, you need your beer in 3 weeks. Oh shit, that's not lagering time.
Not
so
lager.
it was definitely a one-off, but we did do 2, so we cheated. But yeah, it was. There are so many. We had very quick conversation about the different things we could do to explore water. There are other directions we could have gone in, other things we could have tried. So yeah, definitely, heaps of things were left on the cutting room floor in terms of what we could have done instead that we did discuss. And I don't know whether you guys just hit one thing and then did it, or whether you talked about various options and picked one. But yeah, we talked about a couple of things. This stood out straight away as like, oh, that's a cool idea. Let's do that.
For sure.
Yeah, I came up with the idea and then just did a quick 2-way brew and see how it turned out in a week. And then it was like, sweet, got to commit in, which is why I had to pasteurize, because I didn't have enough time in to really dry it out. Yeah, so this is what I thought would be awesome.
And it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a few different yeast strains. I mean, we knew we wanted to use the wrong yeast strain. But it was one go once we'd settled on this particular one. I think the one thing or at least I would have liked to do differently, or if had another opportunity to do it again, is our lovely hosts have a control that would have been like really nice to compare.
We were given a couple of options from HBA, but it was essentially one hit and get it right or don't. You've got 4 weeks to turn it around. Best of luck.
For sure.
Speed. Yeah, and send it quickly. So we did the best we could in the window we had available.
Yeah, I have to say that's our fault, I guess. We literally approach a brewery, say, would you like to get involved in this event? We need the beer by start of July. So, yeah, pressure's on, and we take our hats off to all of you for coming to the table and actually producing 4 awesome beers. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
So I guess to sort of start wrapping up, we'd love to ask each of you what's next for each of your breweries. What's going to happen in the next few years? What would you love to be doing? What should we look out for? You want to start?
Sure. Firstly, I would like to say thank you so much for having us, guys. It's been a really, regardless of the stress and pressure, it's been a really good time. Shapeshifter, we are still very new. I hope to keep, spearheading the brew team and getting stuff done. We're definitely still in development stage, so here's hoping that we continue to grow and smash out awesome beers and get new kit and make process easier and continue to develop with our colleagues and collaborate with our colleagues and make friends and just make bloody great beer. That's what we're here for.
I'm not trying to be a dickhead, but we're starting a barrel trying to start a barrel program, so I'm really excited about barrels right now.
Yeah, maybe more barrels in my wood. Why not? Yeah, maybe I need to make pilsners.
What was your timeline? I can't. What did you say?
I don't have a
remember.
timeline. Just what are you envisioning for in the next few years, or even longer? You can answer
Still
in both
be
ways.
here and making beer.
Still existing.
Surviving. No, just making. Yeah, I think that you said it best. Like just making more awesome beer and pushing the independent brewery scene forward as much as possible and increasing that, whatever the hell it is now, 5% market share that we have, up and up and up. Every time we do it, they buy the biggest ones, we're straight back down again. But just kind of increasing the awareness, being part of this journey that we're all on, increasing the awareness and of craft beer in general and all these amazing flavours you can get in this amazing drink, and experiencing it all.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for tonight. If you have any burning brewery questions for the brewers or for us, please send them through in the live stream chat, or you can send us a message through our social media, or you can come up tonight and ask us after the event. Sorry, we're running out of time. But thank you so much to our amazing panel. Obviously, we wouldn't be here unless you were here and making these beautiful beers for us to talk about and nerd out about. So thank you so much. And a little plug for us, we're Science Made Bearable. Please follow us on social media. Check us. We actually, when we're not running events, we write nerdy science-focused beer blogs. So if you're into what we've been doing tonight, we do write about beer, and some people like to read it. But it's basically what we do in all of our spare time. So check us out. If you've also got any feedback about the event, because we aim to run it every year that National Science Week give us money. So please give us feedback. We'd love to do it bigger and better next year. Also, the event has been recorded, so you can watch it back on our Facebook or on our YouTube channel. You know, the people in the audience tonight have missed out on doing the snack pairing that Lindsay has expertly curated. So you can go and buy another 4-pack from Hopvine and Still. If you want to drink these beers at home, buy the snacks, watch the event again if you like, and nerd out about how the snacks pair so perfectly. The other thing for all the people in the audience, live audience tonight, we have T-shirts for sale. So back to where you came at the door, we have T-shirts, very few sizes, they're very limited, they're $30 cash only, so help yourselves. But thank you so much for everyone. You've been super great audience. What's up? Yeah, and you can buy more beer at Hopvine and Still. You can also order it from Interstate as well. We'll send you more. But thank you so much. Thanks for all the questions that have been coming through, and thank you and good night.